All right, testing. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Here we go. We're on. We are on in exactly 50 seconds from now, and we will go on with the stream from there. Mm. 15 seconds out. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So here we go. I was scrolling through Facebook today and I saw this interaction with Tom Aspinall and a fan. Obviously, just not really anybody known, but that's neither here or there, of course. But they did say something interesting, and Tom Aspinall obviously gave a very, very interesting response, and quite frankly, a very good take. And I'm going to tell you why. It deals a lot with, in the beginning of the stream, if you had noticed, I had put up this quote from Drake, where Drake once said, "You can't talk power moves and life goals around people who don't have the same hunger as you. It is just like you sound like you're bragging." He's absolutely right about that. And I thought to myself, this is absolutely relatable to this particular piece of content right here regarding Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall's chances with Jon Jones. So he mentioned something to the effect, "Well, I rate you highly, brother, but Bones is the GOAT, and you got to put some respect on his name. Just be humble until you and him meet." So I think what this fan is trying to say is that he means well. Obviously, I'm going to read to you, if you haven't already, what Tom Aspinall had said, and I'm going to give you my take on it. But I'm going to give you my take on what this fan is trying to say right here. "I rate you highly, brother, but Bones is the GOAT." So, in other words, he's saying, Tom Aspinall, you're great, but you don't have a chance with Jon Jones whatsoever. You got to put some respect in his name. So, in other words, yes, you have to respect the fact of what Jon Jones did. If you're an MMA fan, you're an MMA fighter, you're an MMA manager, you're an MMA coach, or anything related to MMA or even boxing or other combat sports, you just can't deny what Jon Jones has done. So, nobody is not putting any respect to his name. The problem is you want a certain type of respect to where you're going to cower to this man in a way where, oh, look at me, I'm Jon Jones's buddy or this and that. Because he is the greatest of all time, we have to somehow negate all the other problems that Jon Jones has faced all throughout his career. And if you even dare mentioning anything, let's say maybe even some issues that he's had, whether that would be drug testing or outside cage issues, you're just going to be called a hater. That's just how they're going to view you. So just be humble until you and him meet. In other words, what this person is also trying to say is that wait till you guys get in the cage. Is it that, or is it that you want him to trash talk a little bit more when they get into the buildup, into the press conference, and things of that nature? I mean, what exactly does this person mean by that? And again, it's very cryptic. You can look at it from one way or another. You can look at it from all different angles. The bottom line is you don't know exactly what they mean. And I can only speculate and try to provide some sort of insight as to exactly what this particular cryptic message means. Just be humble until you and him meet, according to this person that Tom Aspinall is interacting with. So now Tom responds back with, I think, is probably one of the best answers that you can get, right? He says, "People like you have no idea what you're talking about, because I want to fight Jones means I respect him more than anybody else. He is the best ever. I'm his biggest fan. I want to test myself against the best and show that I am the best, or at least have the opportunity. Don't talk about respect with top level fighters when you have no idea." So the last part I think is very important to highlight. Don't talk about respect with top level fighters when you have no idea. Adesanya mentioned something back in a couple of years ago where he said, who is it exactly that I need to be humble to? Now, do I need to be humble to the fans who know nothing about fighting, who've never trained, never done it in their lives, never went out and risked anything that they did for them to somehow uh, reach greatness or attempt to reach greatness in any kind of way? How can you relate to people like that? So, what do you mean respect? What he meant by respect was that he shows respect to his training partners, the guys that have helped him become a world champion, the people that have helped him prepare in these contests and these upcoming events, and all the historic matchups that he's been involved in. That is the humility that he's talking about. What people don't understand, and I got to tell you, even from a religious point of view. Now, I don't know how true this is. Obviously, I'm not an Islamic scholar in any kind of way, but they mentioned something to the effect where the only time you're really allowed to be boisterous or flamboyant or very arrogant in the way that you conduct yourself is during the battlefield. Now, I don't know how true this is or what the context of that means. That could mean that, well, hold yourself up with confidence, but with humility, or whatever interpretation that can lead to. In other words, if you're in the heat of battle, I think you're allowed to do whatever you want. And I think anybody who can universally look at that from all points of view, all different cultures, all different religions and creeds, and everything in between, I think they can all understand that when you are in battle, it is almost like anything goes, right? Like, is it wrong for you to say F you to somebody that's trying to kick your legs in or trying to hurt you or trying to basically debilitate you in a way that you're going to stop moving, that you're not going to be able to respond to when, let's say, someone is choking you or this and that? I mean, look, that's just the reality of the fight game that I think people who've never done it really can't empathize with. Don't talk about respect with top level fighters you have when you have no idea. So let me explain to you a little bit of some context and psychology behind Tom Aspinall so that you can kind of get a better look and understanding as to what exactly is it that this man is trying to convey. Well, first off, let's take a look at the baseline of Tom Aspinall. Does Tom Aspinall come across as anybody that's disrespectful to you? Does he come across as somebody that is, let's say, very demeaning, or somebody that is like Colby Covington that would bring up their dead parents at a press conference and things of that nature? I don't think he's that type of guy. And I think we can all unanimously agree to that, all as MMA fans and observers and people that are really invested in the sport. We know that that's not the kind of guy that Tom Aspinall is. So now that we understand that kind of baseline of Tom Aspinall being a respectful guy, he looks at the sport of MMA as a very pragmatic, stoic point of view, to where I'm just here to do it as a sport. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm not here to put anyone in pain. I'm not here to make anybody suffer or anything like that. I'm not here to disrespect anyone. I'm just here to compete and become the best that I can be, and potentially put my name up there as one of the greatest ever. Right? So this is where he's at in his mental mind state. So when he says that you have no idea, don't talk about respect with the top level fighters when you have no idea. This is exactly what he means by that. You have no idea exactly what respect means. Now, let's really get into the crux of it, what this person actually really means. Because the reality is, what this person really means is that Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. How dare you even say that you can come out here and compete with somebody like that? And you're always going to see this in whatever field that you are in. Okay. I remember growing up in Old Bridge, New Jersey, there was this rapper that was in our school. I think his name was Davion or something like that. I remember a lot of people would hype this kid up. They would say something to the effect of, well, Davion is the best rapper. Nah, you can't rap better than Dav or this and that. Well, the reason being is because at this time, I think during the time of our high school days, he had already dropped at least maybe 5 albums or so. And some of those were a combination of mixtapes and full blown albums and some collaborations and singles in between that. So, why is that significant? Well, you got to understand this, right? When anybody tried to challenge the narrative that Davion was not a better rapper than, let's say, the next person that would challenge him to a battle rap or maybe a diss track record of some sort, right? It's like as if people would easily side with this kid because he was the known and more established local rapper. So nobody wanted to uh, supposedly challenge the notion that anybody could potentially be a better rapper than Davion. Now, again, we're talking about subjective matters at hand, right? Because we're talking about rap. We're not talking about sports. Rap is, well, one of those situations where you like what you like, the other guy likes what they like, and one person may not like it at all. That's what rap is in a nutshell. It's an art form that is subjective, just like movies, just like TV shows, and just like podcasts. There are certain metrics that perhaps you can measure in terms of numbers, in terms of notoriety, in terms of views, in terms of ratings. Maybe there's some metrics that you can measure with that, but overall, it's really a subjective opinion. That is also a true reality in fighting. That is, of course, until the objective reality of actually fighting at the night of the fight. Okay, that's when it becomes objective. But guess what? There is no date currently for Jon Jones or Tom Aspinall. And there isn't even a date for Jon Jones's hospital release, let alone his release towards the press saying that, hey, we're ready to fight during this time. There's none of that going on. So from this point on, the only thing that we can really go off of is subjective talk in terms of how Tom Aspinall can absolutely do against Jon Jones. So again, this is what we have to deal with, is just the subjective nature that a lot of people are going to have differing opinions towards. And this is really important to understand, because this fan right here is saying, just be humble until you and him meet. Well, it's not that easy, because you don't know when they're going to meet. But until then, you want Tom Aspinall to look down on himself. That's really what this is. And by the way, credit to the title and to the subject matters at hand. People really do hate other people who have confidence. It's just a reality of it. And by the way, we can talk about that in terms of what is going on in your outside life, but we can talk about that in terms of the modern context in MMA. Take a look at Conor McGregor when he first came up into the scene. Now, he can be your cup of tea. Maybe that's not what you like. Maybe that's not your thing. But make no mistake, Conor McGregor accomplished what he was able to accomplish. And in between that, he had a lot of doubters in between. Same thing with Khabib. He had a lot of doubters coming up. The same thing with Tyson Fury. All these guys that have had successful careers, they've all came up. And guess what? In the midst of that, even with all the mistakes that they had made, and even with all the doubters that had come along the way, they managed to accomplish what many few people were willing to do. Why? Because they either had a strong belief and confidence either in themselves or either in God Almighty, or in Tyson Fury's case, the cause of trying to provide for his large family that he has, not just within his intermediary family with his wife and kids and a daughter and sons and whatnot, but also his father, all his other brothers that are boxers, and all his other brothers that don't fight, that just hang around and have jobs with them in their fight careers. But nonetheless, that these three elements of confidence, family, God, and self-determination. And by the way, who are these three characters that I'm mentioning? With family, God, and self-determination. Well, first, family, obviously, is Tyson Fury. That's who he fought for, right? You can say that he fought for God, or he fought for in the name of Jesus, or this and that. That's debatable. Obviously, we're not here to debate whether one person has a certain religious conviction or not. But for argument's sake, let's just say that Tyson Fury fought for his family, and successfully he did. He put on all his family members, including Tommy Fury, who, by the way, is probably one of the most famous influencer boxers of all time. Now, why is that important to understand? Because let's face it, Tommy Fury, as great looking as he is, and not only that, a great of a boxer as he is, he would not have had all the opportunities that he had with Love Island, being able to meet Molly May there, being able to be on a Jake Paul card, and being able to get put on with, let's say, fights that he now has going on with Roy Jones, and all these other fights that he's had in influencer cards and whatnot with Anthony Taylor. He would have never had those opportunities had he not been the brother of the undisputed world heavyweight champion of the world, which is the Gypsy King Tyson Fury. He would have never been able to have those opportunities. Okay, so that's really important to understand. So Tyson Fury has accomplished his goals and his motivation. Now, what about Conor McGregor? What was his? It was self-determination. The fact that nobody wanted to believe in him, and the fact that he was so confident and so brash that nobody wanted to hear any of this. And I'm going to tell you why. Because a lot of you hate when a person is more confident than you, because you look inside yourself and you think, you know what? I'm not a very introverted person. Okay. And then you see this person who's extroverted, who's extra happy, just laughing and smiling away, or this and that. And then here comes the gloom of doom of the day, basically becoming the Scrooge McDuck of it all, trying to down that person for being the happiest they can be. This is one aspect of that. The other aspect of that is, you look at a person, right? You've ever been to, let's say, a pool party where everybody is jumping on, let's say, that little diving thing or whatever, and sometimes it's long and scary, and there's only one guy out of that whole entire group that has enough balls to get in there and jump off the diving thing, right? Or let's say if you guys are in a river and it's cold or something like that, and hey, I dare you to do this and that. And then there's always that one guy, let's just for reference sake call him Tom, right? How appropriate, because we're talking about Tom Aspinall, but not really the Tom Aspinall, obviously the fictional figure that I'm trying to convey in the story. So Tom goes and jumps off the river, Tom goes and jumps off the pool, and then you think to yourself, wow, Tom has all this confidence in the world. But I think to myself, man, you know what? I hate his guts because he has all the confidence in the world and I don't. And I'm just here sitting, moping away, just wondering what is it that he's doing? Why is he doing all that and this and that? Look, the reality is, maybe I'm not going to say that you hate your life. That's a cliche thing to say, because I don't know. I mean, that's another thing with people. Like, they like to assume that just because somebody has such a boisterous opinion or loud and obnoxious or something like that, that somehow they hate their life or hate others or this and that. It's a very weird dynamic that a lot of people have when it comes to that concept. But nonetheless, one thing you got to understand, right, is that is one thing that people hate the most is confidence. Now, not all people hate confidence. Some people love confidence. They love being around a confident person because they know that they are not. And they know that, hey, being with this guy, being around a guy that's confident, it's going to boost them up, or it's going to boost the morale of the whole room. And you know that you're not, but you're okay with it, and you're okay with this guy being confident. That's one of the type of people that I've seen and ran across. The others that I've ran across are the ones that are introverted and want everybody else to be introverted and live in the world of their introverted point of view. And that's not always the case, because obviously we're all different. We all have different approaches. We all have different mannerisms and things of that nature, even to the most religious of us, right? You can go back to the days of the Sahaba, which were the first companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. A lot of these guys, as religious and as holy men as they were, and the righteous path that they were trying to lead, a lot of them had different personalities. There were some that were very out there, that were very brash, that didn't mind speaking up. And then there were some that were a little bit shy and just a little bit reserved. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when it becomes one of these situations where, you know what, I hate this person because he is this way, and I wish that he would just be more like me, just reserved or this and that. That's the problem. And this is the problem that we're seeing right now in this particular content with this person that was going at it with Tom Aspinall. Because once again, it always goes back to what? It goes back specifically to this. Drake once said, you can't talk power moves and life goals around people who don't have the same hunger as you. It will just sound like you are bragging. That right there is the quintessential reality of what we are talking about in a nutshell, okay? Is that people don't like it when you step out of line when it comes to, let's say, the circumference of what they are used to. It's a village mentality. I'm going to be honest with you, right? You go to any village in the world, let's say, well, I'll give you an example, right? In the 2000s, I remember going to Egypt, right? And going there, I remember I was in a village where my family was at. And then I remember wearing shorts. And I thought, wow, you know what? Everybody is looking at me all strange and this and that. And I'm like wondering why. Well, I'll tell you why. It was a small village outside of Cairo, maybe around 50 miles outside of it. And then all of a sudden, while you're out there, it's a completely different world than the metropolitan side of Cairo, Egypt, right? Where everybody is a little bit more liberal, a little bit more laid back, a lot less strict in an Islamic sense. Whereas you go to the villages, obviously they were very strict in the way that they practice things, the way that they practice the religion, and the and let's say they're just a little more conservative, right? That's the best way to really put it. So you're going to look strange walking around wearing shorts. And guess what? If there was anybody in that whole entire village that was not a tourist like myself or a visitor like myself at that time, walking around with shorts, you know that they're going to shame them for it. Why? Because that's just the way it is. Why is this person walking around in shorts when everybody else is wearing pants or this and that, right? That's just what you're going to get. That's just the reality that is presented to you when it comes to people that see other people that try to be so super confident. Now, how about this, right? When Colby Covington had lost, what did he say? He mentioned something to the effect where, you know what? uh he became a lot more defiant even after his loss, which I thought was really interesting, right? But of course, the fans doubled down against him and said, man, you shouldn't have talked that crap. You shouldn't have talked that smack towards Leon Edwards. But the reality is that what was Leon Edwards going to do if, let's say, he didn't say any of that? Would Leon Edwards have tried to fight him even less? Would Leon Edwards try and not knock him out in any kind of capacity? I don't think that's really the case, is it? And the reality is that I don't think that it would have changed one way or the other. Now, yes, did it affect Leon Edwards in a way where he cried after that press conference? Yes, of course. But I think that's still irrelevant to the reality that he was going to fight him the way that he was going to fight him regardless. Leon Edwards is always going to try to go for a knockout. And sometimes he doesn't always get a knockout. Sometimes he fights in a way where it's safe, it's methodical, it's technical, and it's not really overreaching of any kind or swinging to any degree to where he's trying to go for finishes, big knockout powers, or anything like that. He wasn't trying to do any of that. All that he was trying to do was do the same thing that he had always done in the staple of all his matches that he's had for a long time. So the idea that Colby Covington should not have talked smack because, oh, it would have done the fight a little bit differently, or now he looks even worse, or this and that. I'm going to tell you guys, whether you win or lose, you look bad in the eyes of fans regardless. So it's really up to you to decide what you think is victory. Even if you lost the fight, you could say, you know what, I gave a good account of myself. That in and of itself is a win. You lose a fight, big deal. It's still a win regardless, because guess what? You were there to experience and understand what you did wrong and how you can come back and be better from that time on. But the other fans are not going to see that. They just see the superficial side of things. So guess what? if you're dealing with a fan base that just does nothing but look at the superficial side of things, what are you going to do? You're going to try to break your neck by trying to satisfy them in whatever it is that they want to be satisfied with. And by the way, always understand this: you will never satisfy them. So this is something that you have to understand. By the way, speaking of that quote, I got to tell you, I was watching The Crown, the Netflix Crown, that depicted the royal family, right? And I remember seeing Dodi Al-Fayed, and which was weird, by the way. He came back from the dead after the car crash, and he was talking to his father. But I mean, obviously, it's a very strange scene, but I'll tell you what I found very interesting about that scene. He said to his father, "Don't try to satisfy the West, because they will never be satisfied with you to any capacity." Right? So I thought this was an interesting quote, because even though it's fictional, even though the writers wrote this in to say that, because it's depicting passed away Dodi Al-Fayed talking to his father, okay? It's like there's a good message within that particular interaction, fictional or not. Obviously, it was fiction because it's dealing with a person that passed away talking to his father, which probably never happened, maybe in the dreams of Muhammad Al-Fayed. But either way, one thing you got to take out of that is it's not just the West that you can't satisfy, it's the entire world. It's the entire fan base of MMA. It's the entire fan base of boxing. It's the entire fan base of the entire sports world, especially in the mainstream sports world. You're never going to satisfy them. You look at what happened with Team England. What had happened with them? Well, during the European finals, when they were taking on Italy, a few of their players missed a penalty field goal, right? And by the way, the fact that they were, well, let's say darker skin colored players and whatnot, I think gave them a bigger reason to go after them in a very harsh way, because they missed the goal and whatnot, right? And now imagine if those guys had made the goal. Guess what? The entire England fan base would be riding them till the sunset. But the reality is they didn't. So they're going to slag them off and put them on the side and somehow blame this whole entire game on them. Nonetheless, don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you guys like this content that I did. Sorry I did such a long intro with 20 minutes in the beginning of the podcast before I went into live stream. But now here we are. I came in here, dropped about 26 to 27 minutes of content. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, check out the new videos that I have out right now. Tony Ferguson's fatal mistake. If he doesn't retire, here's why. With the past interactions in combat sports that sort of highlight the fatalities and the realities of all these things going on. Matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to show you guys this video as I exit out into this content. As I exit out into this live stream, I'm going to show you guys this video, and I will come back either just right after this video or just end the stream right there. We'll see. We'll just take a look at the view counts in between, and we'll go from there. Full combat sports careers. What do you think of? You think of Floyd Mayweather. One comes to mind. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Joe Calzaghe, and also George St. Pierre. You can also add Lennox Lewis and Rocky Marciano to that list. Now, why is it that they have a successful career? Well, simply because they left the game on top and undefeated. Or in Lennox and George St. Pierre's case, defeated every guy that they had ever faced, whether they had lost to them, only for them to come back and beat them the second time around. So why is this significant? The one thing you got to understand about Tony Ferguson is that he just hasn't had enough. He really doesn't understand that it could be absolutely fatal in his career and in his life if he continues on and takes these fights that really, at this point, he doesn't really need to do other than, of course, money. Now, the problem with that is there is a saying that goes, what are you going to tell a fighter to do if all they knew how to do their whole entire life was fight? And in Tony Ferguson's case, This is absolutely a matter of fact in his life and what is going on in his current circumstances. The guy has clearly taken a significantly amount of damage all throughout his career. He tried to bring in David Goggins only for nothing more than a show, to be quite honest with you. David Goggins is a former Navy SEAL. Some would consider him a war hero. And on top of that, the guy is a social media influencer in terms of motivating people to work out, or in his case, work out even harder, doing extreme levels of, let's say, miles and runs that may be inconducive to the mixed martial arts calendar and daily schedule and what you have to do to train as a professional athlete. So he brings him in because he thinks that he's lacking some brain power of some sort or willpower. And the problem with that way of thinking and that way of narrative that Tony Ferguson is trying to drum up in his head is that he doesn't understand that he's already tough. He's already a world level mixed martial arts fighter. On top of that, the guy is also highly damaged in his whole entire accumulation of the career that he has spanned on. From the Chandler knockout, you can even add the Justin Gaethje fight. Then you can even add the Donald Cerrone fight. All the other fights that he's had going down all the way to Danny Castillo and going up all the way to Anthony Pettis, he's taken a significant amount of damage to where you really have to be concerned for his life. And the problem with this issue is that it's easier said than done when you're trying to tell Tony Ferguson to quit. Now, why? Well, how are you going to tell somebody to quit whose whole entire ethos and way of fighting and philosophy and discipline is based on never quitting? And although in your prime years of your mixed martial arts and athletic career, this may be conducive to, let's say, the lifestyle that you need in order for you to withstand all the training and all the hours that you have to go through. It's great. You need this. The problem is you're now at the age where a lot of that is really, it's null and voided. Because all the damage that you've had is not going to help you with any toughness that you think you have in comparison to what you once been able to withstand based on the fact of accumulation of damage and everything in between that you can read with Tony Ferguson's career in terms of why he's significantly damaged and why he can't continue this way. But the other problem is that what are you going to tell him to do? Because the other aspect of this is the addiction of the limelight. Yes, it is that. A lot of people in this particular matter, fighters, they love to believe that they are somehow, how do I say this, different than everybody else. Some fighters are overtly arrogant and on top of that, overtly aggressive. And then there are some that are, well, covertly one way or the other. Right? There's a lot of guys, like, for example, take George St. Pierre, as I've mentioned earlier in this particular content. He's one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters of all time. But if you look at him, he's a very calm individual. He's very respectful to everybody else. He doesn't step over his boundaries or transgress against anybody. But there's a lot of guys that are like that. A lot of guys are wholesome. A lot of guys are based. A lot of guys are humble. But how are they in real life? That is the two different questions that you have to take into consideration. Because although Tony Ferguson likes to play up this role of, well, I'm just an average guy from Southern California, you have to understand there's a little bit of a smug within Tony Ferguson that tells everybody else, well, I'm better than you, I train longer than you, and this and that. How do I know that? Well, because a part of me, even in my younger days, I don't know about now, maybe a little bit of that, I do sort of feel like, man, you know what? These people aren't working out as hard as me. So therefore, you know, they're no good, or I have some sort of smug attitude about that. It happens. It happens with all guys that are highly athletic, alpha males or sigma males or whatever category that puts you in a different spectrum outside of society. Tony Ferguson is no different than that. The problem with being so alpha-like and not ever quitting is that you don't know when it's really that bad for you at a certain point, right? Because you got to remember, again, just like the title of this entire content spells that this is going to be very fatal for Tony Ferguson. And I hate to say it in such a grim manner, but these things exist. There was a guy named Ray Ray that I used to train with, a Del Paso Heights fighter out here in Sacramento, back in the 2011, 2012s. This guy took on a few guys from Team Alpha Male, a team that I've also trained with. And lo and behold, a few years later, or maybe just a few fights down the road, this guy ended up dying from brain damage, where basically the blood leaked into his brain or something like that. I don't know the full extent of that medical history. Obviously, there's HIPAA laws involved in the United States, but that's neither here or there. The point of the matter is, it was all caused by basically all the injuries, all the fights that he had taken. This guy fought a lot. There were a few fights where he took on 4 guys within a span of a month. So that's 4 fights in a span of a month, and he just kept taking them, and eventually it became very fatal for him. So this is the reality of combat sports as we know it. Conor McGregor has witnessed one of his Portuguese fighters. Well, not like he killed him or anything, but obviously he died as a result of the mixed martial arts contest. And I remember Conor McGregor in 2016 felt very hesitant into going back into the world of mixed martial arts, because if you remember, it was a time where he was in between the 2 Nate Diaz fights. He already had the first one, and in the second one, they were trying to build up a rematch of some sort. So he was in between trying to think to himself, you know what, should I retire or should I continue on fighting? And a lot of that really came when he witnessed the man pass away in the cage. So this is a very real sport. Like I've said, I've trained with guys that have died, guys that have been paralyzed, people that have been in serious injuries, or people that are just punch drunk altogether, right? So that's the minimum damage of it all. That's the, I guess, less worst thing that you could possibly deal with in terms of long-term combat sports, pain, agony, damage, and everything in between. But when it comes to the extreme of things, because you have somebody like Tony Ferguson who has a very extreme personality, guess what? This is one of those situations where it can become extremely fatal for his entire career, because, not to go off on a tangent that I had lost earlier, but again, it's the limelight. It's the addiction to that specific lifestyle, well, that gives you all the attention during fight week. The feeling of even just cutting weight and peaking. Let me tell you guys, if you've never prepared for a fight in your whole entire life, you guys are missing out. Because the peak level that you feel in your fight week, I swear to you, it is the greatest high that you will ever experience in your life. If you can emulate that particular high in your life where you are peaking, I'm telling you, you're never going to want to let it go. Even if, let's say, you don't compete anymore, there's going to be times where you're going to have, let's say, an 8-week camp. You say to yourself, well, I'm going to go train hard in this coming weeks, maybe an 8-week course or a 12-week course, maybe even an 18-week course. Nonetheless, you are getting ready for this particular feeling. And then in the last week of it all, i.e. the fight week, whether imaginary or real, guess what? It is the best feeling in the world when you go through those phases of training extremely hard in the beginning of a training camp. And then in the middle of it, basically tapering down or focusing in on the specific matters at hand, which is sport related, the art of mixed martial arts altogether, as opposed to, let's say, the conditioning, the drills, which are long past way before camp. And then you have the aspect of conditioning. You have the aspect of doing extreme rounds. Some guys will do, let's say, 7 rounds and 7 minutes within those rounds to really build up their particular stamina. Some guys do 6 minutes when you're only doing 5 minutes inside the cage. and then you sort of taper it down to where, let's say maybe in a fight week, now you're just doing Tabata drills. And if you guys don't know what Tabatas are, it's kind of like going hard for the next 30 seconds, which is a very low impact training. It really boosts your hormones and your HGH based on the explosive activity that you do in those workouts. And then you taper it down. You do less as the fight week comes on. I'm telling you guys, not to go off on a tangent of training camps, but man, I swear you, it is the most addicted feeling in the world. Even with the training that goes in between, it is the most addictive feeling in the world. You never want to let that go. So can you imagine Tony Ferguson, who's an active fighter, who's been an active fighter, even all throughout the pandemic when everything seemed to have been shutting down? And guess what? The pandemic is literally what had put Tony Ferguson in the back foot of his whole entire career. Let's just really understand the dynamics of that reality, because a lot of people want to just say, well, it was the age or this and that. Yes, that's true. But there are guys that can perform at a high level even when they get older. You guys, a little glimpse of Sacramento right there. You see? So you never know what you're going to get in this particular podcast and this particular content, right? So there it is, Sacramento for you guys as I am crossing the bridge on 50 East or so. So anyways, Tony Ferguson really needs to let go. You guys have to understand that if Tony Ferguson doesn't let go, he's really going to have serious problems in his life and his career. So I think that's really all the end of it that we can do for this particular content. Reason being, it's getting dark and I don't have much light to really go off of. Maybe we could, maybe do this a little bit. That's fine. But like all things related to the subject matter at hand, you got to know when to call it quits. And Tony Ferguson is in this phase of his career right now where he doesn't know how to call it quits, and it could be very fatal for him because of the addiction to the limelight, the addiction to having the cameras in your face during fight week, and on top of that, more importantly, the identity of being a fighter. I got to tell you, there's this one fighter that that I know online, right? Nick Ring, right? A Canadian fighter. Very impressive a record, right? Even if he was only let's say a prelims fighter or maybe even a few times a main card fighter in the UFC. What was exciting about him, or what's great about his career, was that he was never finished. Even in his boxing fights, he was never finished. So I suggest you guys check out Nick Ring on his Facebook. I don't know if he's got any other social media or this and that, but me and his brother, we've had a few discussions and a few debates online with political topics and whatnot. But even when I did talk to him in private, he was a very gentleman-like person, right? Very similar to most Canadians. And one thing that I think is important that I took out of a conversation out of him was that he said that once I got done fighting, it was almost like I didn't have a certain identity. So that's another thing that you got to understand with Tony Ferguson, is that he has this identity attached to being a fighter. And that's very problematic in trying to retire on time to where he doesn't suffer any more significant damages along the way. But either way, man, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's getting dark out here in Sacramento. And don't forget to tell a friend to share, so that we can make this channel one of the most epic channels of all time, so that I can present to you some of the most epic combat sports news and news around the world, period. Inshallah. Don't forget to like and subscribe.